I was sitting a few feet behind Lois Reiss in the Kasson-Mantorville High School auditorium this afternoon for something that we didn't necessarily expect. The location was moved from the Dodge County Courthouse because of social distancing and because there was more space. This was, of course, Lois Riess, who had grabbed national headlines from 2 years ago when she killed her husband David and then went to Florida and was later found in Texas. It was a nationwide manhunt at the time. Going into this afternoon's proceedings, I expected to hear motions during what was scheduled to be a pretrial. Judge Jody Williams started by going over the fact that Lois was waiving pretrial, entering instead a plea of guilty, and was going to be sentenced right then and there for killing her husband a little more than 2 years ago in their Blooming Praire home. Take a look at this picture. This is what I took after the proceedings were over and all had left the auditorium of Kasson-Mantorville High School where this happened today. More than a dozen deputies were on hand for security. Lois Reiss literally took center stage in the Performing Arts Center. About 24 family members were there and filed in through security. A few ended up speaking about the impact that this has had on their lives. For them, this was the first time being able to hear the official details because, like I mentioned, it was initially set to go to trial. And all this information was evidence. Law enforcement couldn't share the details, not even with Reiss's family or their children. Lois Reiss's defense attorney, Lori Trow, gave the details as to what happened on March 11, 2018. Reiss says she and David had gone to their grandson's basketball game. They left early and the two argued. When they were home, the arguing escalated to David taking a loaded gun, handed it to Lois and told her to kill herself, and then referenced a past suicide attempt that Lois had taken on her own life and then told her to get it right this time. That is according to what Lois told her attorney. She says she took the gun, she aimed it at his heart and pulled the trigger 2 or 3 times. Then she says she knew he was dead and laid down next to him, then covered him with a blanket, where he would then lay for a week while she was on the run. It's about a week later, family called sheriff's officials. Sheriff's officials went to that Blooming Praire home for a welfare check, and that's when they found David shot to death. Reiss's son made reference to not knowing what to believe about Lois's story. He said he didn't know if he could ever forgive her. Their grown daughter said that she would work on forgiveness because that is what her dad would have wanted. And then Lois Reiss addressed the court and even turned to face family members. She apologized and said life without David is her true sentence. She didn't break down, but plainly said she shouldn't have taken his life and that she feels that she deserves what she is now facing. Judge Williams, not liking the fact that Lois had turned around, ordered her to face the court and proceeded to hand down a life in prison sentence without the possibility of parole. She begins that sentence at the Minnesota State Corrections Facility in Shakopee. 40 days served is credited to her. Prosecutors in Florida had sought the death penalty because Lois Reiss had pled guilty to murdering Pamela Hutchinson, a woman that authorities say Lois killed to steal the woman's identity before eventually being found in Texas. Florida prosecutors had initially sought the death penalty, but then accepted a plea for a life sentence. Reiss then waived extradition and was brought back to Minnesota to face the first-degree murder charge, which, like I said, she was sentenced for today. Now, the man who led the charge in this investigation, Sheriff Scott Rose, I'd asked him many times if he could talk to me throughout these 2 years, every time something came up in this case. He could not. We didn't know what was going to happen in Minnesota. A lot of people have asked him, why would you want her brought back to Minnesota? He is answering that question and much more as I sat down with him after today's proceedings. We'll have that after the break. Before the break, I spoke about the sentencing of Lois Reiss that happened this afternoon inside the Performing Arts Center at Kasson-Mantorville High School. Lois Riess, of course, the Blooming Praire woman who killed her husband in March of 2018. She was just sentenced to life in prison without parole. I sat a few feet behind her during today's sentencing, seeing it all firsthand, and then asked Dodge County Sheriff Scott Rose if he would sit down and talk to me about this entire investigation. From the very beginning, when we heard about it as the media, I can't remember if we knew that it was a homicide investigation right out of the gate, but when I knew that it involved Dodge County, I contacted you, and from the very beginning you said you could not talk to me about this at all. Now that everything is done and we can talk, tell me when your office found out about it and responding to the call, did they know that they were going to a possible murder scene?
Initially we were looking at it as a welfare check because David hadn't been seen. And then it evolved from there to them checking the property and the residence and seeing him inside the house.
And how long had he been deceased? That do we now know?
I don't know the exact amount of time.
Do you remember the date on when you guys did the welfare check? Because if he died on the 11th, which is what was said today.
Right. I think it was about a week. Yeah.
So then your deputies get back to you and say what?
I got a call at home saying that David was found. Evidence of there being
that he was shot.
Foul play there, that he was shot. And initially unsure. You know, when you get a scene like that, you don't know if it's a suicide. You don't know if, you know, for us with the Reiss family, we never had any contact with them, so we had no context to know any of the chemistry of the family or who the kids were or anything. You know, so your initial first thought is suicide. You know, and then once they started investigating the scene there, they determined that obviously it was not a suicide.
When did you know that this was going to be bigger than a local investigation?
Once we had the information that she had been in Iowa and then left from Iowa going south.
Did you know right away that there was a gambling issue after maybe interviewing family members? So yeah. Did you check casinos?
Yeah, we had that information.
Was there any casino stops and surveillance video where
yes.
she had been seen?
Yep.
And none of that had come out, so we didn't know.
No. Yeah, it's just a sad deal all the way around, unfortunately. But we knew once she was out of state, we knew that things were going to get complicated because you have multiple local, state, and federal agencies assisting to try and locate her, and the media. I mean, the media played a huge role in the gentleman on South Powder Island recognizing her from news stories.
Finally able to speak of the details of the Lois Reiss case, Dodge County Sheriff Scott Rose was also inside the auditorium today when Reiss's family gave statements before she was officially sentenced. This is just the beginning of their healing, the sheriff told me, and explains why. I heard today, and you were in there
yep.
today as well, and we heard David's, was it maybe mother?
Yep.
And referenced the media. It sounded like there was some anger or maybe some disdain, that the media had dubbed her the grandma killer.
Right.
We, as a local station, never called her that.
Right.
But that's how things kind of unfold, and family members then get angry with the media.
Yeah.
But you're crediting some of
Absolutely.
the media.
And I came out when some of those descriptions of her were being used on a national basis. You know, we came out and said, hey, you got a family here that's hurting. You got grandkids that are affected here.
Had any of them heard from her?
Not that I'm aware of. So, but the bottom line, you look at it, you have this family lost their father, their brother, their uncle. These grandkids who spent all their time with Grandpa and Grandma essentially lost both Grandpa and Grandma.
You know, and something else that was brought up today that we didn't hear, I don't think, in the past. I hadn't remembered ever hearing anything about mental illness
Yep.
and a suicide attempt.
Yep.
That is something that you guys are dealing with more now than 20 years ago,
Right.
These mental health calls. You
Yep.
don't know what you're going out on.
Yep. Yeah, you don't. You know, it's the job's really become different, especially with COVID. You know, everybody's stir crazy, everybody's cooped up. Stress levels are high. Small arguments become large arguments, and that might not normally be. It's just been a tough year for everybody. So one thing with the family, one challenge with the family for us, because of how this was drawn out, because of the second homicide in Florida, because of her being arrested in Texas. Normally, charges and the factual basis for the charge becomes public once the suspect is officially charged in court. Because of all these variables, including the issue with COVID, you know, this family essentially has waited over 2 years to find out what happened to Dad. We weren't able to tell them. It wasn't public. So today was the first time they'd heard
The details.
what allegedly happened there at the house. They've been waiting for 2.5 years. So, you know, for them, they're still at the beginning of their grieving process because they've not had a chance to process everything. So, we feel horrible about it. Our investigator, Ben Boley, was the lead investigator on this case, and he did such a great job with the family, but super frustrating for him too because you can't say anything. You know, you don't want to compromise the case. You know, you want to try and comfort the family as much as you can, but now we're part of 2 different cases. We're part of the Dodge County case, and then we're part of the Florida case. So it just became really complicated and frustrating and pretty stressful for everybody.
Law enforcement is able to now close the book on the Lois Reiss case now that she's spending life inside a prison without the possibility of parole. Sheriff Rose can answer the one question so many people continue to ask him. Why bring her back to Minnesota from Florida when Florida was already paying to imprison her for life? Doing this at the high school is unprecedented, especially on a day where people are coming out to vote.
That wasn't planned ahead of time.
Was or was not?
It was not. It just so happened to be the same date that was picked. This date was picked a while ago, and we didn't take into any consideration the primary aspect of it. We were just making sure that part of the building was available for us to secure and close down.
It seems odd, though, at a high school.
It was very odd. And the challenge for us is, obviously, we're all set up in the courthouse with camera surveillance and door surveillance and
metal detectors.
Metal detectors, and it's a very, very, very secure facility, especially for our size county. For us to move that operation to as big of a complex as the Performing Arts Center is, you know, took a tremendous amount of staff and planning and organization and even a separate dispatch unit that was parked outside.
Go there with me for just a minute, because when I found out it was going to happen at the high school, my first thought was, she has nothing to lose. And she's dangerous.
Right.
And is this the best idea? I had to question the location myself, thinking there's going to be a lot of people around. This isn't a secure courthouse.
Right. We were given the task a few months ago to find a facility that was large enough for the high number anticipated of media, family, and public who could potentially show up to the hearings, and all follow the social distancing guidelines set by the state judicial branch. So that part was kind of out of our hands.
A pretrial hearing, though, you don't have to worry about a whole lot of people coming.
Nope.
Maybe not even a bunch of media. When did we know, did it get out that this was going to be sentencing? Because we didn't know this last night.
Yeah, the final details of it, that hasn't been done very long. The process of putting the agreement together has been in the works for a while, but just recently finalized, And
Now she's not going back to Florida.
No.
A lot of people would say, why would Minnesota want her here? I understand that this is where the first murder happened,
Yep.
but then it's a cost to our state.
yeah, it's, you know, that was agreement between the governors, and we don't have any input in that.
Do we know where she's going to end up?
Where?
Yeah.
She'll be in Shakopee.
Okay. Federal?
Yeah. She'll be in the state prison in Shakopee.
Okay.
I've had a lot of questions about, you know, why bring her back? Why go through the process? You know, the one thing we did work with, the Attorney General's office was great in working with us, working with the defense, in trying to facilitate this and make it go as quickly as possible for the family, for the community. You got a community of Blooming Praire that you know, lost a business, lost friends of the community.
You live here. You know these people.
Yeah.
You're involved on a personal level to some degree.
Right. You know, it's affected everybody.
Yeah.
So the closure was really important. You know, certainly for the family, and you know, she committed the homicide in Florida, but that doesn't, and was convicted of it, but that doesn't give her a pass for what she did here. You know, this is where it started, and because of all the variables, it was so important in my mind, for the family to have that closure here, to be able to do their victim impact statements, and you know, and try to process this and move forward with their you know, the grieving process.